today I am going to talk about the 20 books that I want to read in the year 2020. Now, lots of people are doing this kind of a thing, and I thought that it would be a fun challenge for myself, a personal challenge, to try to read these books that I have had on my Goodreads TBR for quite a while, since like before I started BookTube. Some of them are more recent than that. Some of them are just even from last month. But yeah, I just feel like these are ones that I really want to get to, and sometimes, which I'm sure all booktubers are, accustomed to, you put things on your TBR and then you put more things on your TBR, and the things that you said, oh, I really need to read that right now, get pushed back in favor of readathons and other things that you just need to read right now. So without further ado, here are the 20 books that I would like to try to read in 2020. The first book, if you saw my 2020 bookish goals video that I posted a few days ago, is to read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This has been something that I have said I've wanted to do for years, and just to experience what this book is all about and why it is such a harrowing read, I guess, for a lot of people. I am going to start reading this in January, so this first one will definitely, well, hopefully, get checked off the list within the first couple of months in 2020. The next book I want to read is The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek by Kim Richardson. And I first heard about this book on Sarah from Steeped in Books channel, and it just looked really interesting. I never knew that there was an actual, I don't know if it's a genetic condition, but something that, and I don't think that it's still a thing today, but I'm not sure, that turned some people's skin bluish. And there were these people I think in Kentucky maybe, that were considered to be the color blue. And they were discriminated against, just like African Americans were, or are. It just seems like it's going to be a really interesting, informative read. It's also kind of about the first bookmobile type of a situation, so that part really intrigues me too. So yeah, I hope to get to this pretty early in the year as well. The next book that I chose for this list was just added in October for Victober, and that is The Diary of Hannah Kolwick, a Victorian maidservant. And this is a nonfiction book about a maidservant in Victorian times, where she kind of talks about her day-to-day life as a maidservant for, I think, various high-class Victorians of the day. When I read How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman for Nonfiction November, she referenced Hannah Kolwick quite often in her research, and I think it sounds really interesting, and I don't know how many firsthand accounts of things like that we still have surviving, so I think that would be a really interesting take. I really loved How to Be a Victorian, so I think that would go along quite well with that novel. The next one has been on my list for quite some time, well, at least since I started BookTube, but that is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens, and I have heard about this on multiple channels, mainly Tom Reads Things and Katie from Books and Things, and Kate Howe. They have all read this book, and they all have glowing reviews of it, and I do want to try to read all of Charles Dickens' works. I've read a few of them. I just read Oliver Twist as a reread for Victober. I have read in high school Great Expectations. But that was quite a while ago, so I would like to reread it. So basically, I feel like with Charles Dickens, I'm starting from scratch because it's been so long since I have read pretty much anything by him except for The Christmas Carol, because I have been in that show multiple times. So I know that story like the back of my hand. But yes, I think that Dombey and Son would be great for my next Charles Dickens read. It sounds really interesting, and it also sounds like it might be kind of a feminist story. It's about a man named Dombey who only cares about his son because he will inherit his business, and he doesn't really care about his daughter. And I think it's about their relationship and how she kind of fights against his this regard for her. The next book is Echo by Pam Munez Ryan. And I want to read this via audiobook because I have heard marvelous things about the audiobook version. And I saw that Scribd has it, or at least did at one point. So I'm hoping that they still do. And if not, I'm hoping that my library's Overdrive app has it. It's a middle grade book. It's a middle grade book that revolves around music and the power that music has on our psyches. And I don't know much about it other than that, but I just know that the audiobook version has a lot of lovely music that's involved. So just to listen to the audiobook, I guess, gives it such a more special experience than just reading it on the page. So yeah, I'm very excited for this audiobook. The next book is Grania, The Story of an Island by Emily Lawless. This is another Victorian read, and I believe that it is a Welsh novel from the Victorian era. And I have heard about this book from Kate Howe, and she absolutely loves it. It sounds like it is just wonderful writing, and I don't know much about it other than that. I think it is just more of a landscape and character-driven novel, but Kate just loves it and goes on about it, and I think she's read it a couple of times now, I think. So that makes me really intrigued to read this not as well known, I feel like, Victorian novel. And if it is Welsh, which I probably should have done my research before doing this video, but if it is Welsh, that is not an area of the world that I have much experience reading about. I did visit Wales during a trip in like 2011, and it is a beautiful place. So I would love to read more from Wales. The next book is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and it is the first in the Mistborn series. And this will go along with another video that I plan to make on series that I want to start or continue. And I have not started Mistborn yet. And yeah, I have read the first book in the... I forget what the series is called, but it was called The Way of Kings. And I listened to that, and I think that was the first book that I realized that I can't listen to high fantasy. I was just so confused by the end of it. So I think that I am going to try just physically reading The Final Empire in the Mistborn series. My coworker that, recommends a lot of fantasy reads to me, he said that he thinks I might enjoy Mistborn more. He said it's not quite as intense, I guess, as Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archives, that is the series. And I do want to continue the Stormlight Archives, but I think I just need to go back and physically read it and take my time with it. I cannot try to listen to a high fantasy audiobook and do other things at the same time. I just don't pay attention, and then I am so confused. But Apparently the Mistborn series is a little bit easier to get through, so I think I'm gonna start there. Book number 8 of my list is Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell, another Victorian author. And I want to read all of Elizabeth Gaskell's works. I have read 3 so far, and I just randomly picked an Elizabeth Gaskell book that I want to make sure that I read this coming year. Preferably, I would like to read all of Elizabeth Gaskell's books next year, but I wanted to at least make sure that I put one on my list of must-reads, just in case things get out of hand and I don't do what I want to do and read her entire canon in 2020. Book number 9 is Peter Nimble and His Fantastic Eyes by Jonathan Auxier, and I read for middle grade March, I believe it was this year. Yes, I think so. Sweep, the story of a girl and her monster, and it was a fantastic book. And Auxier also, I believe, currently lives in Pittsburgh, which is by where I live, so I kind of consider him a local author, even though I'm pretty sure he wasn't born here. But I just was so fascinated by Sweep that I want to get through all of his books. I mean, if he can write like this for middle grade, that was just, I can't imagine that anybody, even if you don't read middle grade normally, you should definitely pick up Sweep. And I'm hoping that if that is any indication of Jonathan Auxier's writing style, that Peter Nimble, which is a series that he has going, will be just as fascinating. Book number 10 on my list is A Little History of Literature by John Sutherland. Now, I don't know much about this book, but I heard about it, I think, from Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, maybe Katie from Books and Things, maybe both of them. I don't really remember where I first heard about it. But as a literature person, as a literature major in college, I just think that this would be a nice little history book for me to read. And it does, I mean, it's a little history, right? So it's not going to probably bog me down with a lot of different things. It hopefully will just be like an overview of a timeline and that kind of thing. So I don't know much about it, but I feel like it would be a good nonfiction November read for 2020. So we'll see. Number 11 is Olive by Diana Mullet Craik. And this one I have definitely heard about from Katie from Books and Things. She loves this book. It is another Victorian read. And this one focuses on a woman named Olive who has a medical condition which gives her a spine curvature, I believe. And in that time, she is told, well, you're never going to marry because you're just undesirable now because of this physical deformity. And it's just about how Olive makes a life for herself that doesn't involve getting married, and how she comes to find solace and contentment in being unmarried, which is something that would have been kind of unthinkable in the Victorian age for a woman, and it would have, put a lot of shame on her and a lot of probably pity on her. But apparently in this book she comes to find contentment in her single life, which I think for a single woman in her now late 30s, I feel like that's a book that I should probably read. Book number 12 is The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. Now, I originally had Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy on this list, but I changed it because as much as I do want to find out what all the fuss is about with Tess, and I know what the book is about, and I know it would be hard, but just everybody who talks about it just feels like so emotionally drained after they read Tess that I kind of am intrigued and I want to find out why it's so terrible. Not not the book is terrible, but the content is terrible. But I just don't know if I'm emotionally ready to go there yet. I have read Far From a Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy, and I really enjoyed that, and I don't feel like it was that depressing, which Thomas Hardy is known for his depressing works. And I heard about The Mayor of Casterbridge from Kate Howe, and she didn't make it sound like this one was a depressing Thomas Hardy. So I think I'm going to ease into my depressing Thomas Hardy by going to The Mayor of Casterbridge for my next Hardy read. The next book is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. And this one I was going to try to read for the Irish Readathon in March of 2019, but I didn't get to it. So I want to put it on my reading schedule for next March. And I want to read more Irish authors, and I tried to read Marian Keyes, and I don't know, I don't think I'm a contemporary women's fiction type of a person, so I want to try Emma Donoghue, because this seems like it has a little bit of magic realism in there, and I'm all for that. So I think it's about a reporter or a missionary of some sort. Yes, I think it's a missionary who goes to this small little town to observe a girl who is apparently subsisting on no food for months, and I guess she's, working towards sainthood or something like that. I'm not really sure. So a lot of these books I'm kind of working on not a lot of synopsis here, but it just sounds really interesting, and it's an Irish author that I really would like to try to read more from, so that is definitely going to be first on my list in March. Next is Villette by Charlotte Bronte, and this I heard about first on Lucy the Reader's channel, and she is a big advocate for reading the Brontes, and she has made me want to read all of the Brontes' works. I have now read Jane Eyre, obviously, Tenant of Wildfell Hall, Wuthering Heights. So now I'm just kind of working my way through the lesser known Bronte works, which I feel like at this point they're all pretty well known, but I feel like Villette is still, if I would go to somebody that doesn't watch BookTube and but maybe is pretty up on literature that I know in real life, they would probably tell me that they've never heard of Villette. I hadn't heard of Villette before I started watching BookTube, so I eventually want to read all of the Brontes' works, so Villette is the first on that list for 2020. Next on the list, and this is number 15, so we're almost done, is Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And this one is probably the book that has been on my TBR for the longest since I started watching BookTube. And I first heard about this book from Molly Reads, and she doesn't do BookTube videos anymore, at least not right now, but she's pretty active on Instagram. She just had a baby, and so that means I don't think she's coming back to BookTube anytime soon. But yeah, so I loved her channel. She was one of the first channels that I found on BookTube, and she gushes about this book, and it's been on my TBR for so long that I really don't remember what it's about. Of course, right? But I've heard that it has beautiful writing. I think it involves a bookstore, and so I'm just really interested to get to it. And I don't know when, but I'm planning to get there in 2020 because it's been on my TBR for far too long, and it needs to come off that TBR into my read list. Next is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I feel like this is on a lot of people's TBRs. And I always hear that it is about the building of a cathedral, but so much more, and that's really all I know. It's also a very, very long book, so I'm attempting to read a lot of long books in 2020, so we'll see if I get to this. I'm hoping that I can. I actually saw it in a little free library at one point, and I failed to pick it up. So I am kind of kicking myself now because when I went back to the little free library, of course it was gone. But I'm hoping that maybe I'll find it again, and if not, I'll just pick it up from the regular library. but um, but yeah, I'm really intrigued by the premise because nobody ever tells me anything more than it's about more than a building of a cathedral. Okay. Would you care to elaborate? But nobody does. So I am interested to see if this is really as exciting of a book as everybody seems to think it is. Next is another Elizabeth Gaskell book, and that is Ruth. And I think this involves the fallen woman trope that is so popular in Victorian literature. And I believe that I've heard that this is the one book that kind of tarnished Elizabeth Gaskell's image for a little while because people were used to her writing things like this and being this controversial in her books. So I'm really interested to see what it's all about and what conclusions she comes to regarding the fallen woman, because I believe Elizabeth Gaskell was the wife of a Unitarian minister, and the Unitarians, at least at that time, were very involved in social justice, and they probably still are today. I just don't know much about that. So I'm going to assume that Elizabeth Gaskell does not put fault with the fallen woman, but I don't know, so I'm intrigued to find out. The next book is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I bet you're wondering if that was going to be on my list because everybody and their brother is reading this book. I read A Man Called Uve by Frederick Bachman earlier this year and loved it. So that makes me think that I need to pick up Beartown. I've avoided Beartown for a while because it involves subject matter that I just don't feel like I'm ready for right now. Again, it sounds like very depressing reading, and I don't know. I was at a point in my life when this book started making its rounds on YouTube that I just didn't really want to read about rape and towns divided and all that kind of thing, and the blame game and everything like that. And I didn't really want to read that, but now I feel like I'm in a place where I might be able to handle it a little bit better. So that's on my list for actually, I think, in January, because my friend Kim is planning to read that, and she kind of wants to unofficially get our in real life book club back together and read that book. So I think that is on my TBR for January. Next is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. And this is another one that I first heard about from Molly Reads, and also Katie from Life Between Words. And they both don't really make booktube videos anymore, but they were one of, two of the first booktube channels that I started watching. And they both raved about this book. And I have since seen a few other booktubers read it, and there have been mixed reviews, but generally most of them are good. So again, I think it deals with some hard topics about domestic abuse and things like that. But hey, I mean, apparently I want to read hard topic books in 2020. Why? I don't know, but I might change my tune. So. Well, I'll have to do a mid-year wrap-up or an update and see if I've changed my mind on any of these books. And last but not least, number 20 on my list is Where the Crawdad Sings by Delia Owens, I think. Yeah, Delia Owens. And this one also been on my TBR for a while, and I've started hearing about it again. More recently, and it just sounds really interesting. Again, a hard topic. It's about a girl who was abandoned in a marsh, and then there's a murder, and she's kind of framed for it. So yeah, not a nice topic, but yeah, it just sounds really interesting. And Molly and Katie raved about it when it first came out, I think, and so it makes me at least want to dip my toes in. So there you go. Those are the 20 books that I'm going to try my hardest to read in 2020. There's a lot of long books on that list, a lot of hard topic books on that list, so hopefully I can get to them. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed my video. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of these. Maybe we can buddy read. And I will talk to you in my next video. Bye, friends.